Sealing your tent tight against freezing air is the setup mistake that can leave you colder by morning. And I'll show you the cold weather pitch that keeps your insulation working. The part that catches people is this: the right openings let cold air in, but can give you a warmer sleep system over the whole night than trapping warm, humid air inside. Seal it up, and frost can fall into your sleeping bag, quilt, jacket, and tomorrow's clothing. That moisture collapses insulation, increases heat loss, and raises the risk of hypothermia. Leave the tent slack and poorly anchored, and wind or snow can close the vents or partly collapse the shelter. After a lifetime in tents, I've learned that daylight decisions come due at 3 in the morning. We'll follow the moisture, compare single wall and double wall tents, deal with frozen ground and snow, then build the pitch and cover what stays outside. The first thing people do is close everything: roof vents, door tops, vestibules. It feels sensible. Stop the draft, keep the warmth, but your breath and skin are adding warm water vapor to that small shelter all night. When it meets fabric, the floor, or frozen ground, cooled toward the outside temperature, it reaches dew point and turns into droplets or frost. Seal the openings and the air gets more humid while the tent shell stays cold, so the moisture settles on the walls and gear. And that frost is not harmless. Brush the ceiling at 3 in the morning and it can fall into your sleeping bag or insulated jacket, melt, and wet the insulation. Do that over several nights, and the loft that was meant to keep you warm starts losing the argument. Ventilating the tent will just make me colder. That is the wrong trade. A little convective heat loss is usually better than damp, collapsed insulation. The draft feels like the enemy at bedtime. Damp insulation is the enemy at dawn. Before the trip, find every roof, door top, and vestibule vent in daylight. Then open the designed vents before you settle in. Keep your sleeping gear off the walls and adjust the opening instead of going from sealed to wide open. The tent stays cold, but it stays less clammy. And that brings us to the amount of water one sleeping person puts into that tent, even on a clear night. A tent can be wet inside even when the weather is clear because you are putting water into it. Breathing alone can add roughly 200 to 300 grams overnight, and cold, dry air can increase respiratory water loss. Field reports approaching a liter are only ballpark figures, not exact calculations. The amount varies, but your breath reaches cold fabric quickly. When condensation soaks a sleeping bag, quilt, or insulated clothing below freezing, it increases conductive and evaporative heat loss. Loft collapses. Wet down can clump, lose much of its insulation, and be very difficult to dry in the field. That can turn a safe sleep system into a liability on the next night. So keep your face outside the bag. Use the hood, draft collar, or a scarf for neck warmth. Remove damp clothing before sleep and wear enough dry layers to stay comfortable without sweating or crushing the bag's loft. I learned this camping since I was a boy with my dad. Warm breath feels sensible for 5 minutes. The moisture makes its argument later. Even shoulder season, a few degrees below freezing, can be damp enough to wet insulation. Now, why does that same breath land in a safer place in a double-wall tent than in a single-wall shelter? A double-wall tent gives that moisture somewhere else to land. Your breath passes through the breathable inner, then condenses on the waterproof fly outside it. That gap matters. It keeps most of the frost and droplets away from your bag, quilt, jacket, and shoulders. A single-wall shelter has no second skin. The same moisture lands on the inside surface you're sleeping beside. Touch that wall with a down bag, and you can transfer frost straight into the insulation. So open the vents you have, keep the bag and any lofted clothing clear of the fabric, and cook outside when you can. A single wall tent is not a bad tent. It just asks more of you. No amount of venting makes it behave exactly like a double wall because there is no separate fly to catch the moisture. And even a good double wall tent will still collect some frost near freezing. The job is managing it, not chasing some perfectly dry little house in the woods. If you are buying a tent for cold weather camping, I think a double wall is the more forgiving choice. Weight is worth carrying when it keeps water off the thing that keeps you warm. Before the trip, pitch your tent at home and look at the clearance around your pad and bag. Then preserve that clearance at camp. Keep the fly taut and shake frost off before it gets into your bedding, because ventilation only works while the tent stays standing and tight when frozen ground, wind, and snow start changing the pitch overnight. The stakes and guy lines help keep you warm because they hold the tent's shape, keeping the fly clear of the inner and the vents usable. The mistake is using short stakes, skipping guy lines, or accepting a loose fly because the evening is calm and the ground feels hard. Frozen soil resists ordinary stakes and loose snow anchors can pull free. Wind or snow can then sag the fly, close vents, or pull the tent partly down. That exposes you to cold wind while you are in a sleeping bag and not dressed for it, which can rapidly raise hypothermia risk. Match the anchor to the surface. On frozen ground, use longer, heavy-duty stakes or spikes where practical. In deep snow, compact a platform and use a buried deadman anchor. Those methods assume enough snow or a vehicle for heavier gear, so they are not minimum requirements for every shoulder season trip. Use every guy line and tension the fly before dark. Check it again after the tent settles. My rule is simple. In cold weather, an unused guy line is gear you carried out there to admire. If snow is rare, skip snow anchors, not secure anchoring on frozen ground. A calm evening can make a lazy pitch look clever. Snow loading is next. A taut roof can sag under wet snow and close the vents that manage moisture. Snow loading can turn a taut evening pitch into a sagging roof. Heavy, wet snow or drifting accumulation bends poles, strains fabric, slackens guy lines, and closes vents. That is structural trouble, but it also shuts down the airflow managing condensation. If combustion devices are used, blocked vents can let carbon monoxide build up, so keep stoves and heaters out of a sealed tent and never bury the vents. Before sleep, and whenever conditions allow, knock snow off the roof, clear the vestibule, and keep the airflow route open. Retention the fly after clearing it. A short snow wall can cut wind, but burying the lower walls and vents traps humid air and makes the tent wetter and colder. Snow flaps and snow piled around the base do not replace good guy line tension and suitable anchors. A tent roof carrying snow is not a hat. It is a structure carrying a load, and it does not care that the pitch looked fine at supper. If you are car camping in a big, cheap summer tent, expedition anchors may be overkill when the vehicle is close. Venting, fly tension, an insulated pad, and roof checks still matter, because those tents are not designed for strong wind or snow loading. Snow varies, so no check promises safety in every storm. A sound tent shell keeps weather out. The next issue is the heat escaping into frozen ground beneath your sleeping bag. The ground keeps taking heat from you by conduction, and an inflatable pad can lose its insulation suddenly through a puncture or failed valve. Put a closed-cell foam pad underneath the insulated air pad. That adds insulation and leaves you a floor if the air pad goes flat. Wet loft loses warmth. If dripping gloves or saturated base layers go inside the sleeping bag, they can soak the insulation overnight. Hang very wet items where they can freeze without touching the bag, and put only slightly damp items near the foot, not against your core. Wear dry layers, but do not pack the bag so tightly that you crush its loft or sweat into it. Keep your face outside and use the hood or draft collar. Cold, dry air also increases water loss, and low thirst can leave you dehydrated. Drink through the day. Dehydration makes thermoregulation and decisions harder when the cold is already working on you. And cooking or using a gas stove, LPG heater, candle lantern, or other open flame inside a sealed tent adds fire and carbon monoxide hazards, as well as water vapor. Cook outside or in a well-ventilated vestibule with vents open. Never seal yourself in with combustion. The tent is only the shell. Dry insulation and a reliable pad do the warming. Even with this setup, frost cannot be erased. The final question is how to manage what remains. If frost still appears, the setup has not failed. In freezing weather, warm, humid air from you still meets cold fabric and turns to frost. Ventilation reduces it. It cannot remove the physics. Below about 20 degrees Fahrenheit, with still air, open vents may exchange very little air. So read the frost. Keep vents clear, brush frost away from the bag before it melts, keep bedding off the walls, clear snow from the roof and vestibule, then retention the fly. Do not use a heater, stove, or candle lantern inside a sealed tent to dry things or force warmth. Combustion adds water vapor. Flame can ignite synthetic fabric or gear, and poor ventilation can let carbon monoxide build up, causing headache, confusion, and potentially death. Keep combustion outside the sleeping interior, and if you use a rooftop or truck tent, stakes may not matter, but condensation does. Open windows for cross flow, keep bedding clear of the walls, manage cooking moisture, and insulate the sleeping platform as its design allows. Vapor barrier liners can help on multi-night trips, but plenty of people find them clammy. They are a niche tool, not a beginner cure. A little frost is normal. A wet sleeping bag is tomorrow's problem. The next video covers 6 setup mistakes that create leaks, poor airflow, and bad sleep before the weather gets a vote. Check the vents before you zip the door. If this pitch stays standing and ventilated, what ordinary setup errors can still make a new camper miserable before bedtime? The next video covers 6 mistakes that create leaks, bad sleep, poor airflow, and needless work before the weather gets a vote. Until then, tension the fly, leave the vents breathing, and keep the wet gloves out of the bag.